With digital photography, one of the most useful tools that you can actually do is adjust the exposure using post-production. Digital cameras have great versatility to ensure that you get a decent image, even if it was shot a little bit brighter. A good example of this is this image of the pens. Now, it's nice and light and bright, and I'm quite happy with how it's looking in general, and I think it's a nice positive looking image with the brightness. However, I'm not very happy with the amount of detail that's actually in the image. These pens don't look really very cylindrical, they're kind of flat, a bit boring. I'd like to get a little bit more detail, especially within the mid-tones and the shadows. Now, one of the main tools for adjusting exposure is the levels tool. And the levels tool is located just under the subcategory of image and going into adjustments. And you'll find it located just here, so let's give that a quick click. Now, upon clicking it, you'll notice that you've got this box appearing and this funny kind of graph and a little slider. It's a little bit complicated when you first see it, but it's easy enough to understand once explained. This graph is actually known as a histogram. Now, as most of you will know, with digital photography, an image consists of pixels. And all of these pixels have certain information telling it what colour it needs to be, what kind of brightness. All of these pixels are represented within a histogram. Now, with this image, you can see it's quite a light, bright looking image. And the histogram is showing that it is this kind of brightness because you've got this large black section here. All of this represents the pixels within your photograph. Okay? Now, you've got three arrows directly underneath the histogram, a black arrow, a mid-grey arrow, and one that's a little bit lighter. It should be white, but it's not, it's quite a light grey, okay? Now, what these represent, it's the order of the pixels. On the left-hand side, you have black. In the middle, you have mid-grey, 50-50 grey, and then on the right-hand side, you have pure white, okay? Now, you'll see from here, there's a slight gap, which means that none of my pixels on this image are pure white, okay? This can actually be adjusted very, very easily using levels by simply clicking and holding the white arrow or the light grey arrow and dragging it over just towards where the pixels start. Now, you'd have noticed that the image has increased in brightness again. There we go, I'll just let it go. Now, you can go further. The problem with this is you'll suddenly find that you've got really unnatural looking lines, a lot of the details being blown out, it's too bright, okay, it's overexposed. So if we bring this over very carefully, just over there, just so we know that a few of the pixels are going to the maximum white, it means we've got it as bright as we can without damaging any of the pixels, okay, and without having to change the contrast too much. The same can be said about the black. Now, we've got a large spike here, which means that something within this image is pure black. You can't get any darker, okay? And a good chance is going to be this shadow along here and just down here. Some of those pixels can be very, very dark, okay? But I'll give you an example again. If I bring it over, you'll see that a lot of the pixels are starting to get darker and darker. That's because the pixels on the left-hand side of this, where it was originally, have now all been told you must be jet black because that's basically what I've wanted, okay? Now, when you move it, you'll notice that the mid-grey point, this arrow will move and try and stay in the middle between the black and the white to give a decent level of contrast. It doesn't mean it has to stay there because you can actually manufacture it to change. For example, this is the main tool that I want to use when fixing this image. I want to have a little bit more shape here, and the way to do that is I want to take these pixels underneath the lower side of the pens and make them a slightly darker shade of grey just to give more of a cylindrical shape. So all I have to do is click and hold the midpoint, bring it over towards the majority of the pixels, and you'll notice that it starts to get a little darker. I've still got the lightest point and I've still got the darkest point. It's just the midsection that starts to get a little bit darker. Now, I'm finding a little bit too much because the blue here is very, very dark now. It's a bit too much, okay? So I'll bring it back over. Still not in the middle, but it's brightened up here, but you can see there's a lot more shading under the lower side and there's clearly light pixels on top of the pen, so it gives much more emphasis of the shape of the cylindrical pens. Now, if you find that your image will only give you very light pixels, say for example you've done a landscape and you've got white clouds and they're all very, very bright and you want to bring them down, This is where the output levels tool is very, very important. You've got two arrows, you've got the black and you've got the white. Now with this gradient going across from jet black to white, this actually shows the kind of maximum darkness and lightness that you will be allowed to have within your image. Now this is standard, you've got pure black and pure white. If I've got white clouds and I don't want them pure white, I want them to look a bit more like storm clouds, I can actually click the white arrow or the light grey arrow and bring it down, and you'll notice within this image all the white pixels have started coming down. It's getting darker and darker and darker. If I bring it all the way down, you won't have anything left. Okay? That's because this represents the white pixels. If I click and drag down and I say I want them to look a bit more grey, I can actually select what kind of shade grey that I want them to be, and that's what the arrow is doing. It's saying anything up to this point, this is the brightest my image is allowed to be. Same thing works for the dark arrow. Pure black here, I don't want pure black, I want to brighten it up a little bit, so I can click and hold and bring it over, and I'll say the darkest point within any of my pixels is going to be this shade of grey, and you'll notice that it's got a very grey looking dull colour. All the contrast has gone, it's very flat. Okay, so be careful when you start using this tool, because it can actually damage your image more than it enhances. Okay, and that's pretty much how you use the levels tool. So if you just click OK, there's your image, and that's pretty much it.